The parish, just because of its location, because of its architecture, is a symbol within our community of the church and what it stands for.
I would describe the National Shrine of the Little Flower as a place where you're going to find Jesus Christ.
Just by walking into the church, approaching it, you see the majesty.
It's almost like living history itself.
People come from all over in pilgrimage to the National Shrine, and all of them talk about their devotion to Saint Therese and how she has influenced their lives. Therese has had a tremendous impact on the church throughout the 20th century. Father Coughlin and Bishop Gallagher, they decided that it should be the shrine of the Little Flower, which is her nickname. She spoke in her writings about all of God's creation being like a garden, and that she was like the littlest white flower in that garden.
It's nice to bring to mind that she was just a young girl, and then to have these pictures of her in real life, I think is quite dramatic. That brings the saint really home.
Her whole outlook on everything is that, like, do the little things with all the love you can give.
She stood for peace. She stood for caring for others who can't care for themselves.
It's almost like living history itself. People come in and tell of why they were drawn to St. Therese, their love of St. Therese, and they'll give me an example of something that occurred with them. And they'll ask if it's been a miracle. Was it a miracle?
It's not the place, but rather it's the spirit of our patroness. It's the spirit of Therese influencing the larger community. The first part of this church that was built was the tower, which stands on the corner of 12 and Woodward. It's a tower that is in the form of the crucifix, and is called the Charity Tower, because the greatest act of love is Christ giving his life for his people.
And it was built on the monies that came in from Father Coughlin's Sunday broadcast.
Started with a radio program to children that brought in pennies and nickels.
Father Coughlin built this church for 600 people, the Little Wood Church, and he could not afford it with 27 or 28 families that were there. But it was the dedication of these original people that continued on.
I served my first Mass here when I was a kid, and for Father Coughlin.
When I arrived in America on the first day, so the first thing I did is a shrine. My teacher took me to Shrine Church. So Shrine Church is the first thing I saw in America. So for me, Shrine is like a settler. I'm a settler in America, and Shrine is my new home.
There's all kinds of reasons why they come, but I think once they're here, they're struck by the whole experience of the art and the architecture. It was built in the Art Deco style of architecture that was very popular at that point in history.
It is very representative of Art Deco, even on the little knobs here on the edge of the pews, but you'll see it all around in the square work and the rock work, the cement work, stone work throughout the church.
There's so much history and so much detail in this church.
That's one of the main reasons I like to come here, is just you can kind of, the architecture and that kind of stuff is pretty special.
It's one of the premier Art Deco examples in the United States.
People tell me that they come to church and they're always discovering something new. It's almost as though the architecture is a homily or a sermon in stone. The architecture of the church is very unique, even today, but it was even more so at the time that it was constructed. The basic part of the church, the main church itself, is an octagon. It's an 8-sided drum, if you will. And an octagon is important in Christian teaching because it represents the 8th day, the day of the resurrection.
Father Coughlin really had a vision, and he made the Mass and the Eucharist the center of attention.
The altar itself is an amazing piece. It's a solid obelisk of marble, and it was carved in Italy, in Carrara, and then brought over and placed in the church as the church was being completed, because there was no way to get it. You had to leave part of it open to get it in, to put it in place, and then complete the church around it. So it's at the very center.
Well, probably the way the light shines on the altar, the stained glass. It's just beautiful to just sit here and look at it.
If you look at the main altar, for example, and the main floor, there are 12 sets of pews that extend out. And if you look at it from above, it looks like a flower. The core is the altar, and then you have these petals coming out. If you go back into the gospel, Jesus, tells the apostles, when he's going to feed the crowd, have them sit down. And they sat down in groups of 50 and 100, and were like a flower bed. So it's the gospel visually represented.
So we tell them we have God in the center, surrounded by his people, surrounded by all the things of creation.
No matter where you sit, you're able to see the celebrant. You're drawn into the Mass quite personally.
Sitting in the round, you're not looking at everybody's back of their head. We're looking at their faces, and you can see during the Mass how inspired they are.
I love that it's in the round. I love that you can sit anywhere in church and still see the altar. If I had to describe it in one word, I would pick majestic, because that's what it is. I've been to a lot of different churches, like my grandmothers and aunts and uncles whenever I travel, and Shrine is the best place to come home to.
We're in the womb of our mother when we're here at the Shrine, in a place of safety, a place of prayer, and it's comfortable, like being home where you're supposed to be.
I describe it as my family, because it was so amazing that in Shrine, this community, everybody live together, work together, and help each other. When I describe it to others, I will say, this is my family, this is the Shrine.
As you look at the church from the outside, the roof almost looks like a big tent. And it was done on purpose because it was the tent of the people of God as they were wandering through the desert. And so we need this tent as we are God's people wandering through this world on our way to the promised land, which is the kingdom of heaven.
We have a large community. It's in excess of 4,400 families, or 12,500 parishioners.
I guess you could say it's a big church. There's about 4,000 families, I understand, that are involved here at the National Shrine, but in so many ways it's just a small little parish. It's like you come here to worship the Lord, you come with family, you see other families that you kind of feel family with. It's very spiritual in that regard.
I'm energized by being in this building. And a building sounds cold, but to me, being in this church is warmth.
And that's one of the beauties of this church, is because you feel the warmth of all the people in the church.
It's a place to talk about how all of God's people come together, and that how we must live in unity and peace with one another. But that unity and that peace is brought about by living in that love for one another. As Therese said, to do the little common everyday things with great love because of the love that God has shown to us.